My name is Lena Psibilski, and I am 37 years old. 3 months ago, at the reception following my promotion to Director of Operations at the company where I have worked for 9 years, my mother stood in the corner of the event room near the appetizer table and told my colleague Marcus, while gripping his forearm, that I had gotten the promotion only because I was difficult, and that management must have given it to me to stop me from complaining. She said between us before she said it, which is the verbal equivalent of someone thinking they have turned off the microphone. My boss, whose name is Raymond Park and who has been my direct supervisor for 3 of my 9 years, and who was the person who wrote and delivered the case for my promotion to the executive committee, was standing 2 feet behind her with a glass of water and no expression at all. My mother did not know Raymond was there. I did not know she had said it until Marcus pulled me aside 20 minutes later and told me, in the careful tone of someone delivering information they wish they did not have, what had happened. I thanked Marcus. I went to find Raymond. He had already heard. Before I tell you what Raymond said and what my mother said when I found her and what I said to both of them, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I want to know where you are. Now let me take you back to the first conversation I ever had with my mother about my job and explain what kind of woman stands in the corner of her daughter's promotion reception and tells a stranger she did not deserve it. My mother's name is Elzbieta, which she goes by as Elza, and she is 63 years old and has been a dental hygienist in the same practice in Naperville, Illinois for 26 years, which is a fact I include not to diminish her but to describe her, because 26 years in the same position is itself a kind of achievement and a kind of statement about what she values, which stability and the known quantity and the work that is the same on Tuesday as it was on Monday, and that does not require you to want more than what you have. My father, whose name is Merrick, worked in the same manufacturing plant for 31 years and retired at 64 and considers the 31 years the most productive period of his life, which I believe is accurate, and which I say without irony, because productive means something real in the context of a man who built things with his hands for 3 decades, and who knows what the thing he built looks like when it is done. Both of my parents arrived in the United States from Poland in 1985 and built a life in Naperville with the particular thoroughness of people who understand that everything they have was constructed from nothing, and that the construction required them to stay in place and work without deviation. And they brought this framework into their parenting with the same thoroughness they brought to everything. And the framework had no room in it for ambition as a virtue, because ambition in their experience was the thing that caused people to leave what they had for something that was not guaranteed, and the leaving was the danger. I am the younger of 2 children. My brother Tomas is 4 years older and is a civil engineer in the Chicago suburbs, and my parents have always known exactly what that means because they could describe it in one sentence, which is the standard I came to understand. They applied to legibility. I am a director of operations at a mid-sized logistics technology company in the River North neighborhood of Chicago, which takes more than one sentence and which requires explanation of what operations means and what logistic technology means and why directing. Either of them is a career rather than a job, and my mother's response to this complexity of description has been, for 9 years, to simplify it in ways that strip out the complexity and the achievement simultaneously, meaning she tells people I work in an office, or that I am in business, or when pressed, that I manage people, which is technically one of several things I do and which she uses because it is the most legible element and because the rest is harder to say. I have tried to explain the work more fully on 3 separate occasions, and each time my mother's response has been to engage with the surface of the explanation without the substance, meaning she nods and asks if it pays well and moves on to Tomas's most recent project, which she can describe with the precision of someone who has been given a sentence that fits. The promotion to director came in October after 9 years of progression through 3 roles, each of which my mother described at family gatherings in terms that matched the previous one, meaning the description did not update as the role changed, which meant that her account of my professional life was frozen at roughly the level of the first position I had held, which was coordinator, which is an accurate description of nothing I had been doing since 2018. The promotion itself was the result of 3 years of documented performance under Raymond's supervision, which I describe as documented because Raymond is the kind of manager who writes things down, who produces quarterly performance summaries and formal notes at each annual review, and a record of every significant decision I had made and its outcome, and who presented this record to the executive committee in September as the basis for a promotion case that was, by the time my mother stood at the reception telling Marcus I did not deserve it, already filed in 3 separate documents with 3 separate executive signatures. My mother had not read these documents. She had not been in the meetings. She had been given a sentence about my work by me over a decade, and she had formed a picture from the sentence, and the picture was frozen, and the woman at the reception was talking from the picture, not from the reality. And the reality had a different person in it than the picture did. I want to stop here because I need to ask you something. Has anyone in your life ever described you to other people, using a version of you that stopped updating at some point, using a picture of you that was accurate at a particular moment, and that they kept presenting as current, even as you became someone different? Tell me in the comments. I read every word, and please subscribe now if you have not already, because what Raymond said to me when I found him after Marcus pulled me aside is the part that changed the shape of everything that followed. And it is not a comfortable story, and it is not a triumphant one, and I think it is more useful than either of the things. I found Raymond near the windows on the north side of the event room at approximately 7:15. He was talking to our head of product, and he saw me approaching and finished his sentence and said, "Excuse me," and he came toward me before I reached him, which is Raymond's management instinct, which is always to close the gap, rather than wait for it to be closed. He said he had heard what happened. I said Marcus told me. He said he was fine and that I should not be concerned about his opinion, that nothing he had heard in the previous 40 minutes was inconsistent with anything he already knew about me. I said I appreciated that. He said he wanted to be specific about it because specificity was his mode, and I had been working with him for 3 years and knew this. He said that in 3 years of direct supervision, he had observed me arrive before him on 37 recorded occasions, which he noted without pride because the noting was just accurate, and that I had left after 8 o'clock on work he had not assigned on 22 occasions, and that the case he had presented to the executive committee cited 11 specific decisions I had made that had measurable positive outcomes, and that the committee had voted unanimously, and that the person who had stood in the corner 20 minutes ago and said that I had gotten the promotion because I complain had described a person he had not encountered in 3 years of close observation. He said this plainly and without drama, in the voice of an engineer describing a structural assessment. And I stood in front of the north windows of the event room, and I felt the specific weight of being seen accurately in the same room where I had just been described inaccurately. And the two things together produced something I did not have a name for in that moment, but that I have since come to understand as the feeling of a record that has been kept carefully and that has just been read aloud. I said thank you. Raymond said there was nothing to thank him for, that what he had described was the documented record of the job I had done, and that the job I had done was the reason I was in this room. I said I understood. He said he would like me to know one more thing, which was that, in his experience of promotion receptions, which were events he had attended many times in a 20-year management career, the most useful thing a new director could do at them was to speak to the people in the room rather than manage the people in the room, and that he had observed me doing the former for the past hour and the latter for the past 5 minutes, and that I should return to the former. I said I would try. He said he was confident. He went back to the head of product. I stood at the windows for Thirtis, and then I went to find my mother. My mother was still near the appetizer table, which she had selected as her location at the start of the event, and had not left, which is her pattern at events she is uncertain about, which is to find the most logistically sensible position in the room and remain in it, so that people come to her rather than requiring her to navigate. She had a glass of wine, and my Aunt Basia was beside her, and they were talking about something that stopped when I approached, which told me Basia already knew what had happened, or some version of it. I said I would like to talk to my mother alone for a moment. Basia said she would get another drink. My mother looked at me with the expression she wears when she knows something is coming and has already decided how to receive it, which is a kind of braced patience, the posture of someone who expects to be told they have done something wrong and who has prepared a defense in advance. I said I had been told what she said to Marcus. She said Marcus had misunderstood her. I said I did not think Marcus had misunderstood the words between us. She only got this because she complains, which were the words Marcus had reported to me, and I said them in the way I say exact things when I am being precise rather than emotional. She said she was just being honest with the people at the party. I said I wanted to tell her something and that I was going to say it once, and I was going to be specific, and she was going to listen. She set down her wine glass. That was the sign from my mother that she understood. This was different from the previous conversations we had had about my work, and she was right that it was. I told her about Raymond's documentation. Not all of it, but the structure of it. The 37 mornings, and the 22 late evenings, and the 11 decisions and the unanimous committee vote. And I told her that these were not feelings or claims, but a 3-year record maintained by the person who had been in the room for all of it, and that the record was the reason I was standing in this room as a director, and not as the person she had described to Marcus. She was quiet. I said I had been working for 9 years at this company, and that in 9 years she had described my job to other people as working in an office, which is accurate. The way saying my father spent 31 years walking in a building is accurate, meaning it is the surface without the substance, and that I had let it go because correcting the description felt more costly than letting it stand, and that I was done letting it stand. She said she did not know all of that about my job. I said I had tried to tell her and she had not retained it. She said she had tried to understand. I said I believed her, and that trying to understand and succeeding are different things, and that I needed her to succeed, and that success in this case meant letting the description update as the reality updated, which it had done 9 times in 9 years, and which her description had not. She was quiet for a longer time than she was usually quiet in my presence, which is a woman who fills silence readily, and for whom extended quiet means something has landed. Then she said she was not sure why she had said what she said to Marcus, meaning she was not sure of the motive. And I received this as the most honest thing she had said in the conversation, because a person who understands their motive will usually offer it when cornered. And the absence of a motive offered is the presence of something they are not ready to examine. I said I thought she had said it because she had a picture of me that she had been carrying for a long time, and that the picture was not current, and that the gap between the picture and the reality had become large enough that the reality felt threatening rather than correct, and that this was a thing I understood because I had watched it operating for years, and had named it only to myself and never to her, and that I was naming it to her now because I thought she deserved to know what I had been watching. She looked at me. She said she thought I might be right. I said I thought so too. Before I tell you what the months since the reception have been, I want to stop here. If you have ever been in a situation where the person who was supposed to know you best was operating from a picture of you that you had never updated for them, and if you have ever had to decide between updating the picture and letting it stand, I want you to tell me in the comments what you chose and what it cost. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what happened with my mother in the weeks after the reception and what Raymond did that I was not expecting is the part I have been building toward my father called 2 days after the reception. Not my mother, my father, which was itself a signal, because my father does not call independently. He is on calls when my mother initiates them, and he contributes to conversations she has started. And a call from my father that my mother did not appear to be on was the call of a man who had something to say without an audience. He said he had heard about what happened. I said I assumed he had. He said he had been talking to my mother since the reception, and that she was not proud of herself, which was his way of saying she had been reflecting rather than defending, and that he was not proud of the situation either, which was his way of saying that his own contribution to the picture problem was something he had been sitting with. I said I appreciated him calling. He said he thought they had not paid the right kind of attention to what I had been building. He said this in the flat, factual voice of an engineer who has done an honest structural assessment and is reporting the result, and I listened to it with the recognition of someone hearing an honest thing. I said I thought that was accurate. He asked if he could ask me about the job. I said yes. He asked me to explain what operations meant in the context of what I did, and I explained it, and he asked follow-up questions for 15 minutes, and at the end he said it sounded like important work, not impressive, not like something he recognized from a sentence. Important. I sat with that word for a long time. My mother called the following week. She did not apologize to Marcus directly, which I had not asked her to, and she did not deliver the kind of comprehensive apology that would have required her to examine things she was not yet ready to examine. And I had not expected either of those things. What she did was call me on a Tuesday evening and ask about my job specifically, meaning she asked what I was working on and what the promotion meant in terms of what I would be doing differently and whether I was nervous about the new responsibilities. I answered all of these questions for 25 minutes, and she asked follow-up questions that came from what I had said. And at the end, she said she was proud of me, which she had said before, but which landed differently this time, because it was attached to 25 minutes of specific attention rather than to a generic occasion. I said thank you. We talked for 5 more minutes about ordinary things and said goodnight, and I sat in my apartment afterward and thought about 25 minutes of specific attention and what it had cost to arrive at it, and whether the cost had been worth it. And I concluded that it had been, not because the 25 minutes undid anything, but because they were different from what had come before, and different in the direction I had been waiting for. Raymond did something I had not anticipated. 3 weeks after the reception, he called me into his office and closed the door, and said he wanted to tell me something that he thought I should know. He said he had been a manager for 20 years, and that in 20 years he had observed the specific and underappreciated challenge of people who performed at a high level and were not believed by the people closest to them, and that, in his observation, the people in that situation tended to spend energy that should have gone into the work managing the gap between their performance and the belief of the people who did not see it, and that this gap was a real cost, and that he had been thinking about it since the reception. I said I was listening. He said he wanted to formalize the documentation of my performance in a way that was more accessible than the internal records, which he described as doing what they needed to do legally and operationally, but which were not visible to anyone outside the company. and that he thought I should have a professional record that existed independently of the company's internal system, and that I could draw on as I saw fit. He offered to write me a formal professional reference document. Not the standard employment verification letter, but a specific and detailed account of my 3-year performance, organized by year and by outcome, which he would sign and date, and which I could use for any professional or personal purpose I chose. I said I would like that. He produced it within a week. It is 4 pages. It has his signature and the company, letterhead, and 11 years of his professional title listed below his name. It describes in specific and dated terms the person I have been at work for 3 years in the same register that Raymond uses for everything, which is precise and without performance, meaning it is accurate because accuracy is what he considers useful, and not because he is trying to make a point. I have not shown it to my mother. Not because I am withholding it from her, but because I do not need to show it to her for the document to be real. And because the conversation we had at the reception and the Tuesday phone call and my father's 15 minutes of questions are the beginning of a different kind of relationship than the one organized around the picture, and that relationship is going to be built on ongoing attention, rather than on a document shown once, and I would rather invest in the ongoing attention than in the document as instrument. The document is in my desk drawer in a folder next to my promotion letter, and it is there if I ever need it, and the having of it is its own kind of stability, a record of the reality that exists, whether or not the people in my life are currently consulting. The promotion has been in place for 3 months now. The role is larger than the one before it, and the work is harder and more interesting, and I am learning the specific skills of directing rather than managing, which are different skills that require a different relationship with authority and with the people who have it, and I am learning them with the same attention I have brought to everything I have done in 9 years at this company, which is the attention of someone who understands that the record is being built, whether or not anyone is watching, and who builds it accordingly. Raymond and I have a weekly one-on-one at 9 on Thursdays, which is a meeting we have had for 3 years, and which continues at the same time in the same format, and which remains the most useful hour of my professional week, because Raymond asks questions that require me to think rather than report, and because the quality of his attention to my answers is consistent and complete. My mother asks about my job now, not at every conversation but more often than before, and the questions are more specific than they used to be. And the answers she gives to other people when they ask about me are closer to accurate than they have ever been, which I know because my Aunt Basia told me that my mother described my job at a family dinner in January, and that the description had included the word director, and the phrase runs operations, and the fact that I manage a team, which is 3 more accurate sentences than my mother had used in the preceding 9 years combined. It is a beginning. I want to say something about the 9 years before the promotion, because 9 years is not a number. It is a sequence of decisions and daily choices and incremental progressions that produce the director title and the 4-page reference document, and the unanimous committee vote, and the sequence deserves more than the summary I have given it. I started at the company in 2015 as a logistics coordinator, which was an entry-level role that required me to track shipment schedules and vendor communications, and that paid a salary that covered my apartment in Wicker Park and my student loans, and not much else. I had a degree in industrial engineering from Purdue that I had completed in 4 years on a partial scholarship, and a lot of part-time work, and I had taken the coordinator role because it was the entry point available to me in the industry I had chosen, which was supply chain and logistics, and because I had understood that entry points were the beginning of progressions, and that the progression was what I was actually accepting when I took the role. I was promoted to senior coordinator in 2017, and to manager in 2018, and to senior manager in 2020, and to director in 2023, and each promotion was preceded by a period of working at the level above my current title without the title, which is the standard progression of people who are being evaluated for advancement, and which I had learned to read as the evaluation it was and to perform at consistently rather than inconsistently, because inconsistency during an evaluation is information that managers retain. Raymond was not my manager for the first 3 progressions. He came in at the senior manager stage, which he has documentation on me for 3 of the 9 years, and institutional knowledge for 6. And the combination of those 2 things is what produced the 11 decisions, and the 37 mornings, and the 4-page letter. And the 4-page letter is accurate to all 9 years, even though it was built from 3. Marcus, my colleague who told me what my mother had said, is a person I have worked beside for 4 years and who occupies the specific role in my professional life of someone you have not chosen as a close friend but who has become one through proximity and consistency, and the shared experience of working for the same organization through several overlapping periods of difficulty. He is 41 and manages the procurement side of the operations team, and he is careful with information, meaning he does not share things he does not think the recipient needs to know. And the fact that he told me what my mother said was a sign that he had concluded I needed to know it, rather than a sign that he could not contain it. He told me with the care of someone who has decided that the true and difficult thing is more useful than the comfortable omission. He said, "Lena, I need to tell you something," and he found a quiet corner of the event room, and he said it's precisely, which is to say he reported the exact words and the approximate volume, and the fact that my mother had been gripping his forearm when she said it. Because he is an operations professional, and he understands that the details of a report matter. I thanked him. He said he was sorry, not for telling me, but for the situation, and I said I appreciated the distinction. We have not discussed it since because we did not need to discuss it since. The information was delivered and received, and the topic was complete, which is one of the qualities I most respect in Marcus, which is that he understands when a conversation is done. The reception itself, before the conversation with Marcus and the conversation with Raymond and the conversation with my mother, was a good event. I want to say that because I have described it primarily through what went wrong in it, and the going wrong was a part of the event, but not the whole of it. The event was held in a rooftop space at a hotel in River North that our events coordinator had booked, and that had the specific combination of good light and not too loud background sound that allows people to talk to each other rather than around each other. There were approximately 40 people, a mix of colleagues and executives, and 2 clients who had been invited because their relationship with the company included a relationship with me specifically. My direct team, which is 12 people, was present in full, which I had wanted and which Raymond had made sure happened, meaning he had sent the calendar invitation from his calendar rather than mine, so that it read as a directive rather than a request. The 12 people on my team know what I do and what it costs and what the work looks like from the inside, and standing in a room with them on the night of my promotion was the most straightforwardly good part of the evening, the part that had nothing complicated in it. 12 people who had been watching the work, and who were there to be in the room when the work was recognized. I gave a brief address at the beginning of the reception, which Raymond had asked me to prepare, and I thanked specific people by name and described specific contributions, and said the things that needed to be said in the way they needed to be said, which is specifically, and my team responded the way people respond when they have been named accurately, which is with the recognition of people who have been seen, rather than the warmth of people who have been flattered. My mother was in the corner near the appetizers for most of this. She applauded at the right moments. She was there. Those things are also true. My brother Tomás called in November, 3 weeks after the reception. He had heard about the reception from my parents, and he had formed his own view of what had happened, which he delivered in the specific way Tomas delivers his views on family situations, which is by calling once, stating his view clearly, and then not returning to it. He said he thought my mother had been wrong to say what she said, and that he had told her so, which was a significant fact, because Tomas does not typically intervene in situations between my mother and me, and his intervening was a signal that the reception had been visible enough in the family's information network that he felt it required a response. He said he also thought I had handled it well based on what our parents had told him, and that he was proud of me for the promotion, and that he should have said so sooner, and that he was saying it now. We talked for 40 minutes, which is the longest conversation Tomas and I had had since I moved to Chicago. And we talked not about the reception, but about our work and our parents and the specific texture of growing up in a household organized around stability as the highest value, and what each of us had done with that framework as adults, which for Tomas meant using it as a foundation for a career that was stable by design, and for me meant using it as the thing I was building against, not out of rebellion, but out of the understanding that building against a framework is not the same as rejecting it, that the framework can be the structure that makes the building possible even when the building is different from what the framework expected. Tomas said he thought that was a good way to think about it. I said I had had 37 years to work it out. He laughed, which is Tomas, who laughs at the things that are actually funny, and not at the things that are merely offered as funny. And I appreciated the specificity of it. Raymond's 4-page reference document is in my desk drawer in a folder, as I said, and I have read it 3 times since he gave it to me, once when I received it and twice since, not because I need the reassurance of its content, but because it is the most accurate external account of my professional work that exists, and reading it is an exercise in precision that I find useful when I am unsure whether my own assessment of a situation is reliable. This is a thing I do not say out loud often, which is that years of having your work described inaccurately by the people who are supposed to know you can produce a specific kind of doubt that is not about competence but about assessment, meaning you begin to wonder whether your understanding of your own performance is accurate, or whether the mismatch between your self-assessment and others' descriptions of you means that you are missing something. The document is a check against that doubt. It says what Raymond observed, specifically and over time, and it matches what I know to be true, and the matching is a form of calibration that I return to when I need it. I am aware that not everyone has a manager who writes 4-page reference documents, and that the document is a resource I am fortunate to have, and I think about that when I use it, which is to say I do not take it for granted, and I do not assume it will always be available in its current form, and I document my own work accordingly, meaning I keep records of significant decisions and outcomes in a folder on my own drive that is not the company's system, because my grandmother is not a person who existed in my life in any of these stories, but she is a person I have thought about in the context of documents and records, and the importance of having your own account of your own work that does not depend on anyone else's willingness to provide it. 3 months into the director role, I have a clearer picture of what changed than I did the night of the reception. What changed professionally is measurable and ongoing, and I am tracking it with the same attention I have brought to everything I have done in 9 years. What changed with my family is harder to measure but present in specific ways, in the more accurate description my mother gives to other people, and the 15 minutes my father asked about my job, and the 40 minutes Tomas and I talked about things we had not previously found the language for. What changed in my own understanding is the thing I find most useful to describe, which is this. For most of my professional life, I had operated with the understanding that my performance was a private matter between me and the work, meaning that whether or not the people in my personal life understood what I was doing was a separate question from whether the work was done well and that the separation was not a cost but a fact. What the reception made visible is that the separation had a cost, and that the cost was not primarily to my performance, which was documented and recognized and had been for 3 years, but to the relationship with my mother, which had been running on a picture that was 9 years out of date, and which I had contributed to the outdating of by accepting the mismatch rather than addressing it. The reception forced the address. Raymond standing 2 feet behind her was the mechanism. The address happened. The picture has begun to update. The work continues, which it has always done and will continue to do regardless of what the picture shows. And the picture updating is a separate and real and also worthwhile thing that I am glad happened, even in the form it took, which was my mother gripping Marcus's forearm near the appetizer table at my promotion reception, and not knowing that the person who had documented everything was standing close enough to hear. If you have ever had someone who was supposed to know you well describe you to others using a version of you that stopped updating, and if you have ever found a way to close the gap between their picture and your reality, I want to hear what that looked like. Tell me in the comments. Tell me how you updated the picture. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed it, share it with someone who is waiting to be seen accurately by the person who was supposed to be watching. Subscribe if you have not already, and check the link in the description. There is more there, and I think you will find what you are looking for.